The Milwaukee Bucks last season were seen by many as a heavy favorite after pulling off the blockbuster deal for Damian Lillard. After Dame was not quite the same, there was a coaching fiasco and the defense fell off dramatically. The team just did not look all that good. Add on to it injuries going into the postseason, and we ended up getting a first-round exit instead of a championship. Luckily, the Milwaukee Bucks have managed to have a decent offseason, although I don't know that it's enough to really pull this thing together, and I'm a little bit worried about them going into next year and what the future holds for them in general. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Buckets. If you're over on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. We're trying to hit 200k subscribers by the end of the year, so that subscription is much appreciated. And if you want to enjoy this as an audio-only experience, go check it out on Spotify. That link will be in the description. We also should be on Apple soon. Sorry that's taken so long. Let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. First, let's go ahead and review the season that they just had. They had a decent record, all things considered. They are one of the best offenses in the NBA, but the defense was not good. And this was definitely an expectation going in, given that they swapped Jrue Holiday for Damian Lillard. Jrue Holiday, one of the best, if not the best perimeter defender in the entire NBA, especially from the guard position, to Damian Lillard, whose biggest criticism throughout his career has been his lack of defensive ability, and that wasn't any better as he was getting up there in age. Luckily, what they did intend on trading off, which was getting better offense out of the deal, is exactly what happened at first under Adrian Griffin. However, then, after the change from Adrian to Doc Rivers, they kind of flipped the script to where they were actually a pretty good defense again, but the offense wasn't quite as good as it was under Griffin. So it's kind of hard to evaluate exactly where this team is on either end of the floor due to that factor, but it's very clear that they were not quite as good and dominant as a lot of people anticipated. A lot of people expected this to be the best team in the Eastern Conference, even knowing that the Celtics were going to be good, just purely because, like, Giannis is better than Tatum and Dame is a better second option than Jaylen Brown. So from at least the top-heavy point of view, better team, right? And in theory, I think it was fine to believe that, because if Damian Lillard came into Milwaukee and played like Damian Lillard had up to that point in his career, and off of the great season that he had just had with Portland individually, of course, as they were not a playoff team, then things would have been very different. But unfortunately, Damian Lillard just did not bring the same Damian Lillard factor that he had previous. His three-point percentage was one of the worst of his career. His point per game average was like, what, the lowest since his second season, I think? Okay, no. Lowest since his third season. And also, he technically averaged 24 points per game in the 29 games he played in 2022, but that's a really short sample size, so I'm not going to count that against him. But the season prior to Milwaukee, 32 points per game, 7 assists per game, 37% from three, which isn't crazy high, but he took 11 of them a game. You know, typically your expectation and your hope for a player getting a lower volume of shots is that their efficiency will increase with that lower volume, because you think, well, if you're going to be taking less shots, realistically, you should take less difficult shots. You should look for more shots within the flow of the offense. But frankly, the way that Milwaukee played didn't really allow for that. I don't think that Damian Lillard was ever in some situation where he had access to a million easy shots. He really didn't. Not a lot of off-ball sets for the guy, not a lot of catch and shoot opportunities. I mean, his assisted percentage on threes is the same as it was in Portland when I expected that to go up. His percentage of twos assisted went up a little bit more, but basically the same numbers as in Portland in terms of how he is utilizing his three-point ability. So on that end, not really improving the efficiency. And then, of course, they were far worse defensively because they didn't have Jrue Holiday anymore. So you combine those factors and you get a really disappointing result. If Damian Lillard came in and averaged 30 points per game alongside Giannis, we'd be having a different conversation. But frankly, that was probably never going to happen. And really, I think the main reason for that is a misunderstanding or misallocation, however you would put it, of how these players should be utilized within the offense, what their job should be. And I think between Dame and Giannis, which one of those players would you say needs more of an active role within the offense, needs more of set plays for them, needs more things being designed around their skill set? It's very clearly Damian Lillard. That's not to say he's better than Giannis. That's not what this is about. It's about who needs the assistance of a system and the team more. Giannis is going to get his no matter how many plays you draw up for the guy. I mean, sure, if you're actively looking to shut the guy out, then that's going to be a problem. But given how impactful he is as a finisher, given how scary he is going to the basket, especially on the fast break, he is always going to find these opportunities. He's a good offensive rebounder. There are going to be opportunities for Giannis. The offense should run through Damian Lillard while Giannis plays off of that, rather than the reverse. Because when you instead have the offense run around Giannis, run based around Giannis, and then Dame plays off of that, he's gonna do a lot worse playing off of Giannis than Giannis is going to do playing off of Dame, because Giannis has a big man skill set, the type of skill set where you get garbage points, not garbage points in terms of like in garbage time, I just mean like, you know, you're cleaning up the mess type of points that, you know, a Clint Capella type of player can get. Giannis has access to 12 to 16 points per game just on the virtue of that alone. Damian Lillard doesn't have that. He doesn't have a guaranteed 30 points per game because he can just get to the rim with ease, nothing like that. He needs set plays, he needs off-ball opportunities from three, he needs to be the lead ball handler more often than he is. A lot of the times when Giannis and Dame are on the floor, Giannis ends up having a higher usage, ends up having the ball in his hands more. And to me, that's just not the way that you should do it. You know, if we're going to compare, because this duo got compared to Kobe and Shaq, which there are some obvious logical flaws in that. I don't think Giannis is quite as good as a peak Shaq, and this version of Dame certainly not as good as an early 2000s Kobe. Maybe 2000 Kobe, but not 2001 and onward. If you look at like usage, yeah, Shaq was scoring a shitload of points, but he was doing it in a Shaq way. Who had the ball more was Kobe. Now, obviously, this isn't a one-to-one example because Giannis is much more capable as a ball handler and playmaker, and overall just as a, you know, perimeter player than Shaq is, so it's not a great comparison. However, the principle's there. If you have a player who gets a lot of easy points regardless of the set, and you have a player who doesn't, well, between those two, you prioritize putting the other player in the set more. And what you're probably thinking is, well, if Dame is the focal point of the offense rather than Giannis, when Giannis is the better player and better offensive player for the most part, that means that the offense will be worse, but not really. I don't think Giannis will be worse because the offense uses him a little bit less. If anything, he'd probably be better. Sure, would he average 30 points per game anymore? Probably not, but he'd still average like 25, 26, be able to rest a little bit more during the regular season, not have to carry so much on both ends of the floor. You know, he can focus some more energy on the defensive end, which I've always felt would be the right move for Giannis, and I was hoping that the addition of Damian Lillard would mean that Giannis could do a little bit less offensively, but then he ended up doing more than the year prior when he had a far less competent guard offensively. That's the main thing to me that I think that philosophy needs to flip on its head if the Bucks have any hope, because regardless of what role players you put around these guys, if that dynamic is not perfect, as it seemed like it would be going into it because their skill sets are highly complementary, it's going to be a problem. And instead of Dame and Giannis, the duo, it's Dame and Giannis sharing the floor together but never benefiting each other's games. That's your worst case scenario, where you're paying both of these guys $50 million to do their thing separately from each other while on the same team. This was talked about being a duo, but it felt very uncommon for Dame and Giannis to actually be utilized like a duo. And I think if you're going big man guard, crazy take here, the ball should be in the hands of the guard when you're trying to initiate that offense. Because if it's Giannis in the post passing it out to Dame for a contested three, that's not as effective as them running a pick and roll. The pick and roll between those two was what was highly touted as soon as the duo was put together. Damian Lillard even made comments to the media about how unstoppable that pick and roll duo would be. I couldn't tell you what the usage percentage is on pick and rolls for the Bucks this previous year, but I know it wasn't as high as it should have been. I know every time I was watching them in crunch time, somehow the offense would be some stupid bullshit instead of what the dynamic should have been from the onset. I think it was better under Adrian Griffin. It seemingly got worse under Doc Rivers as the offense as a whole got worse. But if you want Damian Lillard to be Damian Lillard as you knew him to be, the Damian Lillard that you traded for, you can't shut him out of the offense to the degree that the Bucks did this previous year. I'm not saying they outright shut him out. I'm just saying they did not put him in the best position to succeed given what his skill set necessitates from your offense. So that's the primary thing. The main reason I think the Bucks didn't succeed at all last year was because of that. After, of course, the real main thing is the fact that Dame and Giannis both experienced injuries in the first round. I don't think they would have lost to the Indiana Pacers if both of them were healthy throughout the entire round, but it happened. And that gave them the opportunity to address some things. And something I had said about Milwaukee pretty much throughout this entire year is that while yes, because they were super disappointing during the regular season, I don't expect them to go as far in the playoffs as they probably should have. But assuming that does happen, which it eventually did, they're going to have an offseason that would allow them to address a lot of these issues. And for what it's worth, within the margins of what they had to operate with, they did add more to the roster, and it made for a better roster. But frankly, those improvements are going to have to come from the system, not these role players. These role players are cool. They're not going to hurt you. They're going to help you, in fact. I just don't know that it's really going to be enough to bring them over the hump that they have given themselves. So if we're actually taking a look at the additions, they added Taurean Prince, Gary Trent Jr., this rookie AJ Johnson, who I don't know a lot about, as well as DeLon Wright. Or DeLon Wright. I think I said that weird. I think these are all good additions, especially for how cheap they are. Taurean Prince, 40% catch and shoot, 3-point percentage. Actually, Alex, who did some of the research for this, pointed out to me that he actually shot 42.6% on guarded catch and shoot threes, which is definitely very elite. So that's nice. A good traditional 3-and-D player is good to have. Always good to have those guys. Gary Trent Jr. is essentially replacing Malik Beasley. Frankly, I think Gary Trent Jr. is a good bit better than Malik Beasley, even though I did feel that Malik Beasley was underrated. I also feel like Gary Trent a little underrated. The fact that you were able to get both of these guys for such a small amount of money is insane to me. Now, Gary is a little bit more well-rounded than Malik. Malik's game pretty much starts and ends with the catch and shoot three. Doesn't really do a whole lot beyond that. Back when he had that stretch with, I think it was Minnesota, where he averaged 20 points per game, he was doing a little bit more, some mid-range stuff, some drives off of the catch. But really, Malik Beasley, you're expecting him to do catch and shoots, and that's just about it. Gary Trent Jr. can do catch and shoots, but he can also do a little bit more. Not a super high volume playmaker, except a very sound one. He's in the 97th percentile in turnover rate in the positive direction, meaning he's really fucking good at not turning the ball over. I just find him to be a much better playmaker than Malik Beasley. And then he also can do a little bit more shot creation than Malik. Sometimes he has a tendency to do a little bit more than you would like him to do. That's the main flaw with him offensively, I would say, is that sometimes it's like, Gary, this is not your time to shine. Stop trying to make it like that. The J.R. Smith factor of it all, the Dion Waiters factor. But I think this will be improved upon when he is in Milwaukee, because obviously in Toronto, not as many options on the perimeter. Back when there was Pascal Siakam, after him, who you're really looking to shoot the ball. Then you add Scotty Barnes. After those two, who are you really looking to shoot the ball? After Pascal is traded, and now you have RJ. After those two, I guess also Emmanuel Quickley. It's like, who do you want to shoot beyond that? Gary Trent is very clearly going to be the fourth option within this offense, and I think he's fine for that. Still an elite spot-up shooter, 42%, 80th percentile in points per possession on spot-ups, shoots well enough around the rim as well. I do think he's a definite improvement over Malik Beasley, so that's a W. I don't even know who Taurean Prince you would say he's necessarily replacing, but adding him is definitely a W. DeLon Wright, I also think is a big move, because the other thing that people were talking about constantly with this team, you know, with Jrue Holiday leaving, is like, you got to get some point of attack defenders. The problem is, NBA players who are strong point of attack defenders who you want to play starters minutes because their offense is also quality enough to justify that, those players come at a high cost. And unfortunately for Milwaukee, they don't have jack shit in terms of assets. They just don't. They had nothing to give away, so they pretty much had to sign a bunch of minimum guys. And DeLon Wright, I think, probably about as good of a minimum guy in terms of defensive ability on the perimeter from a guard that you could have hoped for. I'm pretty sure Chris Dunn got more than the minimum. Otherwise, I might have said him would be the best option. But DeLon Wright's next best up, especially because I feel like his three ball is a little bit more consistent. It's not majorly consistent and not super high volume, but it's not a real issue for him over the last, if this will load. Why did I forget that he played for Dallas? DeLon Wright, talk about a fucking journeyman. DeLon, fun fact, 99th percentile in steal rate, also has a good assist rate as well, which is nice. So the players that you've added are improved as playmakers, all of them good catch and shoot options, all of them with a little bit more creation ability. Also, I don't think Gary Trent Jr. is some amazing defender. He was actually pitched as one earlier on in his career, and that kind of slipped as he went more the way of the shot creator. But I would say he's an improvement defensively over Malik Beasley. Not enough of an improvement that you feel great about the fact that he's your guard next to Dame, because ideally you would have a very, very good defensive guard next to Dame, but Gary Trent can fill the offensive gap and then not be as big of a liability defensively. So I like these acquisitions. I like all of them. But when you look at this roster top to bottom, it 100% still comes down to whether or not Damian Lillard can be Damian Lillard. And I don't know if they're going to be going into this next thing with the notion that he will be that, with like my idea of him being utilized more like as if he's the primary option. But if they don't do that, I feel like he's just going to continue to be disappointing. Still a good NBA player, no doubt, but definitely not worthy of being an all-star starter like he was this previous year. Definitely not good enough to justify the Jrue Holiday trade in retrospect, because, you know, say what you will about the fact that Damian Lillard is no doubt a better player than Jrue Holiday, the system and identity that came with Jrue Holiday, and the fact that they had all of the draft capital that they moved in exchange for Dame, you know, it's looking like I'd rather have Jrue Holiday plus 4 first-round picks than Damian Lillard. And that's the type of move that, like, you win all in. You win all in on this move working. So if it doesn't, you're probably pretty fucked. And if you look at the age of this roster, that's where things start to get even more scary, because we are talking about a couple of old dudes here. Okay, Damian Lillard's 34. Chris Middleton is 32, and he's going to be 33 going into the season. And Brook Lopez is 36. He will be 37 by the time the playoffs start this year. So we're talking about a lot of old-ass dudes on this team. We don't know how good they're going to be. You know, Damian Lillard obviously already had a down year. Was that because of the system as I theorize, or is that because he's just fallen off because he's 34 and that fucking happens? Especially for, like, athletic guards, that happens for all of them. You know, we're seeing players older and older continue to be good older and older, really specifically Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, and LeBron James. And, you know, we saw Chris Paul pretty damn good at the age of like 35 or 36, but that's not the norm. I don't think it's going to be the norm, and it's probably not going to be for Dame. So is Dame going to have a bounce back year, or was last year just the first sign of his decline? You know, I can point out a lot of the flaws systemically with the Milwaukee Bucks, but I also think that it does come from the fact, to an extent, that Damian Lillard just wasn't quite the same this year. And I mean, if you even let me look this up, actually. I mean, it's encouraging that his numbers without Giannis are good. Encouraging in a way because it indicates that he's not just like bad now. His percentages increase across the board, 40% from 3 on 8 attempts, and he averages 30 points and 7 assists, which is virtually the same thing he averaged the year prior. This is only 8 games without Giannis, but the offense utilized him like he was Damian Lillard more when Giannis wasn't present. So, yeah, that's what it all comes down to. And then it's like, is Brook Lopez still going to be good enough to be your starting center? And if he's not, what option do you go from there? Like, are you going to start Bobby Portis? Are you going to start Giannis at center and like Taurean Prince at the 4? I don't really know where you go if Brook isn't Brook. Chris Middleton, I actually feel more optimistic about because he came back from injury like 2 years ago. Yes, I think. And if you look at his numbers from 2 years ago, they're considerably worse, or from a year, for the season, the 2022-2023 season, 31% from 3, 43% from the field, but he bumped that up to 49% from the field and 38% from 3 this previous year. And if you look at his playoff numbers this previous season against Indiana, he averaged 25 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists. You know, 35% from 3 isn't anything remarkable, but I think Chris Middleton is still capable of being Chris Middleton when you need him to be. Actually, in 2023, when they lost in round 1 to Miami, he averaged 24 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. So I don't think Chris Middleton's much worse than he was at his absolute peak, no doubt. So I think he should be fine. But again, he's still up there in age. So going into this next season for Milwaukee, there is a lot riding on it. I don't know that they have more than 2-3 seasons of trying and failing at this. Like, I think I'm not going to hit the panic button if they don't win a title in 2025. And I might not hit the panic button in 2026. It's also worth mentioning that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to have Giannis on contract for a long stretch of time, if I am not mistaken. Yeah, he just signed an extension that ends in, well, 2027. So if we are fast forwarding 2 years, you know, he'll be on a 1-year contract, and at that point, asking for a trade would make some sense. He does have an $80 million player option. I don't think he's going to get quite that amount of money in anywhere else because of the Supermax extension and all that. But if he wants what's best for his career, and he's also like, dude, I've just cashed in 2 $70 million a year contracts. What's one more? That's fine. I'll just take 55 instead. That would be a reasonable thing to do. Giannis has been one of those guys that it feels more true to say that winning is his top priority. Even though he's always wanted to be loyal to Milwaukee, he's had no issue making comments to the media about the prospect of leaving, mostly just to get the franchise to make moves. Honestly, that's the main reason Damian Lillard is in Milwaukee, because that offseason prior to trading for Dame, or like right before they traded for Dame, because obviously the Dame trade happened like right before the season started, Giannis was making comments to the media like, I want to stay with Milwaukee, but I'm not going to sit here and act like it's a guarantee. That's not what he said, but definitely what he implied. So that got the front office to panic and make this decision, which I don't think is necessarily a wrong decision yet, but it very much has the capacity to be it. 2 years from now, if this team hasn't won another championship, or at the very least gotten damn close, we're going to be talking about them blowing it up, and we're going to be talking about Giannis playing in another team's jersey. I don't really want to see that. Milwaukee winning its championship in 2021, that was probably my favorite championship that I personally experienced in any capacity. 2019, the thing is, the finals were kind of whack, so it took away from how cool that run as a whole was. So otherwise, I'm thinking I don't think I've enjoyed a championship team more than 2021 since 2016. I really like the Bucks. I like Giannis being there, and I like the idea of him hoisting up another trophy or two for this franchise. but it does have me worried. I don't know. It feels like the clock has been ticking, and it especially feels like it's ticking now because we are going into now their 4th season post-championship, and we can't sit here and pretend like this is the same core. Not just because Damian Lillard's here, but because the dudes who were key to that team's success that year are no longer those dudes. They're older, they're more injury prone. Some prominent role players like PJ Tucker, no longer there. He played a pivotal part in that team being championship level because they were able to slot him at the 4 with Giannis at the 5. It's just not good. It's an ugly situation. Last thought, because I did have this thought as I was talking about something else. I wonder if you try Chris at the 2 again. If you bring him back to the 2 rather than the small forward spot and you make your starter Taurean Prince, I think that might be the move. Have Gary Trent come off of the bench. I kind of like that dynamic more, especially if you're going to allow Chris to get more into his old shot creating role. Milwaukee, the future doesn't look great, doesn't look lost, doesn't look hopeless, but it's not pretty. That's for sure. Between good, bad, and ugly, currently we are in the category of ugly. That's it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video. Shout out to Alex with providing some rudimentary research. But that is it. Goodbye.